We good, Mike? Mike?
A lot of mics here.
Yep.
Mike?
And the microphone.
You ready, Michael?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. We're here at Jazz Live San Diego with Lori Bell and Mike Garson. Welcome to Jazz Live San Diego, Lori and Mike.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. I've been here since way back.
When was the last time you were here in San Diego, Mike?
Well, the last one on this show was with Nina Freelon a couple of years ago, but then I used to be on the show, if it was the same show, in the 80s when I used to play at the Summer House Inn in La Jolla.
Excellent. So, Lori, since you're representing the local music here in town, we've got some local artists playing with you tonight in the band. Can you tell folks who you and Mike are playing with tonight?
Sure. We have stellar bassist Rob Thorson, and we have wonderful drummer Duncan Moore.
Mike, are you familiar with the work of Rob or Duncan?
Absolutely, and I have played a lot of gigs with both of them, especially Duncan over the years. He used to play with me back in the Summer House Inn, and then we played with Bob Magnuson and with Lori and a friend of mine from Budapest, a great flugelhorn player named Cornell. So we've done a lot of playing together. And Lori and I did a gig with just Bob.
With Rob.
With Rob. Just 3 months ago in La Jolla, no drums.
Oh,
The
excellent.
community center there.
Yeah.
So it's very enjoyable. A lot of good musicians here.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk a little bit about you together. Lori, how did you and Mike get to know each other and come to be musical collaborators?
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's, of course, an honor and a privilege to get a chance to work with Mike, always. And I first met Mike when I was a kid. I used to come up to the Ilarios, or the Summer House Inn in La Jolla, and sit in with them. He was generous enough to invite me up during the days when he used to play up there with Billy Mintz, and that's how we got to know each other, and just here and there. And then we wound up, like many years later, on the same recording label, Resonance Records. That was about, 8 years ago, Mike, or something like that? And then we started playing together, and Mike, was kind enough to invite me to play on his album, and we started doing concerts together, and we've pretty much been doing stuff regularly, off and on, for about 8 years now.
Can you, Lori, talk a little bit about Mike's piano playing and what to you is distinctive and attractive to you as a flute player?
Well, that's a big question, because Mike is such an amazing piano player. It's like that's like a 2-hour conversation. But how can let's see. The word eclectic comes to mind, but it's way more than that. I would say Stravinsky meets Charlie Parker meets Hindemith meets David Bowie.
That sounds pretty eclectic. I'd say that's
Is
probably
that okay,
a definition.
Mike? Is that kind of...
You left out Bill Evans.
I left out Bill Evans. I'm sorry. Yeah, and everything in between,
So, Mike, playing with flute players is something that you've done quite a bit of in your career. You were in the band Free Flight with Jim Walker, I believe, for a very long time, and
We still play together.
you still play together. So, tell us a little bit about how the flute fits into your music and the kind of the distinctive qualities of that instrument that you enjoy.
I've first of all written a lot of music for flute and piano, and I've even written flute solo pieces without any other instrument. And I've recorded a lot of my music with 6 flutes, all done by Jim Walker. So I just love the tone. And Jim has an amazing classical ability and repertoire, and he's one of the best sight readers I've ever met in my life. And then when we move into the more heavy side of jazz things, you're really looking at Hubert Laws, who I worked a bit with his own band at one point, and sonata was written for him, so it needed a classical musician and a jazz musician. So I had some experience with him. He's one of the finest jazz players. I also had the fortune to work with Joe Farrell, who was amazing on sax, but he was a great flute player.
Right.
And I worked with Sam Most a lot, who was a great flute player, who died, unfortunately, this year. I think so, yeah. And Lori falls in with the Hubert Laws of this world. This is a girl who has worked her head off on perfection of her sound and her lines and her dynamic level and her beauty. as a flutist and jazz musician, and I just love that sound. So flute is close to my heart, you know. Cello is close to my heart, you know. But there's something about the sonics of it, and it blends beautifully with the piano.
Well, Mike wanted to talk a little bit about your most recent release, Wild Out West. It's a trio outing, and sounds like it's a kind of a very different kind of project that I believe you might have never expected that would be released as a recording, but it has now. Tell us about the artist that you play with on that on Wild Out West.
That's Joel Barber on drums, who was Bill Evans' last drummer, and one of my favorite drummers to play with. We've been playing on and off for 25 years. And Derek Oles on bass, who's from Poland, and he's a magnificent bass player out of the Charlie Hayden tradition. It was done on the Blueport label, which is Jim Rod, and Jim happened to bring his tape machines to Virginia City at this opera house that was being rebuilt as we were performing in it. It looked like it was going to topple over in a town that had no people. It was Virginia City. I felt like I was in 1880, and I was supposed to come in with a harmonica and no teeth and play some country music or some blues. And we had 23 people in the opera house, and we just rehearsed for 4 hours, recorded every note, and then we played 2 or 3 hours. So it's a double CD, The Wild Out West, and that was it. And I left, and the promoter, who lost his shirt on that gig and paid us all very well, calls me 6 years later. He said, "Well, does Jim Murat still have those tapes? I've made some money in the stock market, and I want to produce this album for you, or have you produce it. I'll be the executive producer, and you master it and pay the guys and all that kind of stuff." So I spent a year doing that, putting the cover together and all that, and it's really hardly out. It hasn't even been reviewed yet. It's just floating around, and Jim Murat is little by little getting it around to the correct people. But he asked me as a favor to just play jazz. Or we took, let's say, out of 4 hours of music, just the jazz stuff, because I did some classical stuff. He wanted to feature me as a jazz pianist, because he's upset that I'm only known through the David Bowie world and Nine Inch Nails and my fusion playing and my film writing and my classical compositions. And he just said that he felt I belonged out there a little more as a jazz musician. So he picked amazing amount of jazz stuff, both original and standards, and we had so much music that we couldn't get it all on 75 minutes, so we found another 75 minutes, and we do double takes of tracks, and it's a really enjoyable album. But it's live, you know what I mean? It's just what it is, you know.
Well, Lori, let's talk a little bit about repertoire between you and Mike. What kind of music do you guys feel best playing? Is it Mike's originals or standards, or what kind of things are you guys playing together?
Both. We have standards tonight. We have some arrangements of standards. We have a thing that Mike arranged from Oklahoma that we're going to do tonight that has some odd times. Mike's got some great original material. We're doing a gorgeous ballad of his that he wrote called Lullaby for our daughters. Not our daughters, but...
We've changed the Lullaby for all daughters.
For all daughters, okay.
It was too selfish for the first 10 years. I've expanded it.
And we're going to do a couple of mine. I wrote a piece for Mike called Avant Garson. We're going to play that tonight.
It's
blues.
fun.
And a little waltz that I wrote. So we have that kind of repertoire. Standards, originals.
Besta Me Mucho, we have a crazy
yeah.
on.
Excellent. So, Lori, your latest release, can you remind us of your latest release? Was it the music of Javon in 2008?
Right.
And that was a disc on Resonance Records. What have you been up to lately? We know we have chatted here at Jazz 88 about a concert series that you've been doing here in San Diego. Tell folks a little bit about that.
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, the fourth Friday of every month, I was invited to play a concert at the La Jolla Community Center. It's been going great. The concert is just basically a trio, either piano, bass, flute, or guitar. Next month I have Dave Mackay and Ron Satterfield and myself, the reunion of Interplay.
Right.
We did the
And
first one together.
Mike and I and Rob Thorson did the opening, and it's been going so well. They invited me to continue through next year, so I'm very excited to, have that opportunity to present a wonderful, music series in La Jolla every month.
Great.
It's a beautiful venue. There's art everywhere. The ticket comes with hors d'oeuvres and a glass of wine. Kind of can't beat it. It's a classy event, and I'm just really excited about it. So it's the La Jolla Community Center, fourth Friday of every month.
Excellent. So, Mike, you were just kind of mentioning that the producer of your new disc, Wild Out West, really wanted to focus on jazz for you and make that a jazz recording. And there's a lot of writing about how you really aren't known as a jazz musician because of some of the famous people you've played with, as you've mentioned, David Bowie and Nine Inch Nails. But you've done quite a bit of jazz playing over the years, and it seems like it's kind of been overshadowed by the other. Do you feel that way, that or has it been maybe a godsend that you've been able to kind of create in the jazz world and not have to live up to the other side, the rock side of things?
Well, it has its frustrations, right? So it's like a double-edged sword. David Bowie's a great artist, and I was only hired for 8 weeks in 1972, and 40 years later I'm still with him. So that's been a marvelous experience, 18 CDs later. So here's the thing. There's millions of fans that I have from that world that have not a clue that I play jazz or classical, and they don't want a clue that I play jazz or classical, and they're totally content. Just the fact that I played on the Aladdin Sane album and did that solo and Lady Grinning Soul and Time, and they are fine with that. Now after doing thousands of albums for other artists and 20 of my own albums and 20 with Free Flight, the craziest thing is people just keep asking about the one track on the Aladdin Sane album, and every day there's an email from somewhere in the world in every different language.
Wow.
And it's beautiful, and yet it's frustrating a little bit because I was 26, I played this solo as a one take, and I never heard it for 25 years. So it's only was history that told me it was good. To me, it was just another day
In the studio.
And I made $33 on that track, so I thought it was great because that's what the scale was in London at the time. So it's a little frustrating. I've been blessed because I have played with Elvin Jones and Lee Konitz and Stan Getz and Freddie Hubbard and Dave Liebman, Mike Brecker, Randy Brecker, Gunny White. I mean, it goes on and on.
Stanley Clark.
And Stanley Clark for years. But the truth of the matter is, that's a small element of people that buy these records. The average jazz sells 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. My biggest jazz album was 50,000. And with Bowie, you guaranteed millions, and Nine Inch Nails millions. So that's what people heard. If they had the same promotion and the machine for Wild West or any of the jazz albums I've done, I did a Bowie Variations in Jazz, and on Resonance record with Laurie, I did an album called A Conversation with My Family. That's a CD, all originals. And then I have a DVD with Peter Erskine and Dave Carpenter, who was my former bass player before he passed away. And so, but these reach 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people, and they're very loyal, those people. But these other records, they just reissued a 40th anniversary of Aladdin Sane,
Wow.
Still waiting for my royalty bonus and payment. But that's another subject. We'll talk about that after hours.
Well, Mike, before we close with you, can you tell us what things you're working on in the future? It seems like you've got lots of different ideas going all the time. What kind of things are you working on in the future?
The most exciting thing is March 1st at Segerstrom Hall 2014, which is, I guess, 4 or 5 months. I'm premiering a work called a Symphonic Healing Suite. And it's a 12-movement piece I've written in conjunction with patients with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and cancer. And I've given them 30 pieces, and they've chosen their favorite 8, 9, or 10 pieces, and I've added 1 or 2 or 3 that they haven't heard. And I've been working with a brain surgeon, so we actually tested out on them. And a lady with Parkinson's that the brain surgeon did a particular operation on, she's now able to dance. So she asked for a tango, so she's coming up on stage for one of the movements. And I've handpicked a 40-piece orchestra and a 50 children's choir. And that's my biggest thing, is I've been working on it for 2 years and thinking about it for 10 or 15, and so that's coming up March 1st. Other than that, it's just the local jazz gigs that I still love doing, and I do a lot of teaching, and I'm basically composing all the time in my studio up in California, up in near Calabasas and Bell Canyon. That's what I do day and night, you know, and sometimes it's for a purpose like what I'm doing March 1st. Most of the time, it's just composing because that's what I do, you know.
Well, where can folks find out more information about you and your career and what you're up to?
Either MikeGarson.com or, you know, Facebook, or you could look at the music-heals.com. It's a wonderful site, and there's a video of some of the music I'm doing March 1st and all that.
Excellent. Lori, can you update us on some projects other than the series that we talked about, some other things you're working on?
I have a brand new CD coming out in 2014, all classical repertoire. It's my very first one.
Wow.
I just really felt like it was time to have something like that finally come out. Included in it is one piece that I wrote for my mentor, Claude Monteau, who passed away in February of this year. Yeah, it's 20th century repertoire, French and American. So that's coming out, and then the project following that is going to be Streets of New York, with all compositions regarding New York City, which is where I'm from originally. So.
Excellent. And where can folks find out more information about you and your career?
My website, lauriebellflute.com, or Facebook.
Excellent. Well, Lori and Mike, it's great to have you here at Jazz Live San Diego. Thanks for coming in. Best of luck with all the things you guys have got going on.
Thank you so
It's
much
all
for
a pleasure.
having
It was
us.
fun to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Looking forward to the music tonight.
Yeah.
And what about that thing with Cornell you want to put together, that recording?
I do. Are we still going?
Well, maybe we can get to that. We have a little break
Oh.
during the show.
Okay.
I'm still
that-
rolling on the computer.
That we can talk a little bit.
Okay.
Maybe we can talk about that too.
So you'll come out on stage?
Sure.
Yes, around 9 o'clock, and I'll kind of run through
Oh,
that. But
okay.
at 9 o'clock, when I do the station ID,
Great.
I'll ask each of you a question, so it's not too
Sure.
odd that I'm stopping the show. And I'll ask you about that.
Okay.
Excellent. That'll
Great.
be good to promote the interview too. So.
Sounds
great.
wonderful.
Well,
Okay,
thanks.
good.
Thank you.
So, Laura, where are you from originally in New York?
Brooklyn.